Every single day, fast food restaurants like McDonald's produce thousands of gallons of cooking oil from their deep fryers. The resulting product looks something like this.
Oh my god, bro.
Oh, hell no, man. What the fuck?
It's usually stored in a big bin behind the restaurant and left to be picked up by a waste management company. Unless, of course, somebody else gets to it first.
What? Bro, what are you talking about, man?
It might be the most bizarre crime ever.
Thieves are stealing this used cooking oil from restaurants.
Organized crime rings have made millions pumping used cooking oil out of special grease bins like these.
Thieves come along and they cram their hose down there to steal the oil.
Most people will see this disgusting, smelly grease and think it's worthless trash. And that's what I thought too. But it turns out, after a little bit of digging, this waste is actually worth a lot of money. It's so valuable, in fact, that it's become a target of massive underground crime rings. These aren't your typical thieves. They aren't breaking into the restaurant to go steal something from the cash register. They're pulling up in vans or tanker trucks to siphon the smelly shit out of the garbage can in the back. But the insane part is that they're making a ridiculous amount of money from this. We're talking thousands of dollars a night for thieves, even for smaller scale operations. So how's a substance that most people see as trash turned into an absolute gold mine? First, we have to know why the stuff is so valuable. When restaurants collect their used fryer oil after cooking your chicken, it usually sits in one of these big boxes behind the restaurant. But unlike the dumpster, this stuff isn't getting picked up and sent directly to a landfill. There's a whole separate supply chain for it. Turns out that brown, chunky garbage can actually be turned into fuel. The process is surprisingly similar to how crude oil, which is originally useless, slimy, hazardous goop, is transferred into something that powers the world around us. In the case of both crude oil and used cooking oil, or UCO, the first step is to collect the unrefined materials. For crude oil, that's the very demanding process of pumping it straight out of the ground. For used cooking oil, it's just sucking the stuff out of the big grease bin in the back, which is exactly what you see the thieves doing. They both get sent to this specialized processing plant, which takes the seemingly useless material, cleans it up, applies some chemical processes, and boom, fuel. What comes out in cooking oil's case is biodiesel, clean burning fuel that can power trucks, generators, and even airplanes. 1 gallon of used cooking oil can produce roughly 1 gallon of biodiesel. And with federal mandates requiring more renewable fuel in America's energy mix, demand has exploded in the last decade. Restaurants that used to pay disposal companies to haul away their grease now get paid for it. The going rate is anywhere from 30 to 50 cents per pound, depending on restaurant location and the purity of the oil. That might not sound like much, but consider this. A gallon of used cooking oil is roughly 8 pounds. A single large restaurant can produce around 75 pounds per week. That could be around $300 in value for something that you used to have to pay to get removed from the restaurant. Right now, a ton of UCO could be worth more than a ton of crude oil. And unlike crude oil, which requires massive infrastructure to collect and process, used cooking oil just requires some French fries, and it's just sitting there waiting to be collected. Now, of course, $300 a week isn't really enough to risk jail time for. That's only a few days worth of rent for an apartment in any major American city. But it's a combination of these factors that make this so attractive for thieves. Consider how hard it is to rob a bank. Security measures like cameras, silent alarms, vaults, fingerprint access controls, facial recognition technology. In 2025, it's pretty much impossible to do this and get away with it. You'd have to have a hamburger brain to even try it. Well, it's not the same with stealing cooking oil. These bins often have very little security, or none at all, and they're often in these dark places behind the restaurant. From a criminal's perspective, this is the lowest hanging fruit on the tree. It might as well be touching the ground. Unlike back in the day when you had to go into a store and rob a cash register, stealing grease doesn't require dealing with these alarm systems or even confronting any employees at all. From what I've gathered, it seems like these thieves have 3 main methods. each of varying complexity and risk. Method 1 is what I like to call the no shame approach. All it requires is one of these big tanker trucks and an industrial-sized vacuum pump. Not only does the big truck give the thief a good amount of storage for the oil, it also helps them blend in with their surroundings. So when the criminals pull up to a restaurant, they look like professionals and no one really bats an eye. It's like the whole thing with putting on a construction vest. No one's really going to question you if it looks like you know what you're doing. The process is as follows. Show up to a restaurant in broad daylight, vacuum the oil out of the container in the back, and then leave and go claim your next victim. Of course, it helps if the container doesn't have any locks, which surprisingly still happens a fair amount of the time. Another method is just to show up at night instead. This way, the criminals don't need to have a professional-looking big truck. They can just use the cover of darkness to hide themselves. If they need to cut a lock or take down a security camera or two, they can do it without arousing suspicion, because, well, nobody's there to be suspicious of them. My favorite, however, is the people who just walk into a restaurant and try to convince the owner that they are a legit collection company. This is a tactic where you really have to look like a professional. Collection tanks, logos, branded clothes, you name it. There have been quite a few stories that hint at this being maybe the preferred tactic of bigger criminal organizations.
Contract where a company pays him $50 to haul away a barrel of the grease.
If you let us take your oil, and then random companies would show up saying, oh, we're with the company to check your oil. It was like a big mafia.
But the scale of some of the operations that have been found are pretty insane. In 2019, federal agents in North Carolina unsealed an indictment against 21 people who had stolen $3.9 million worth of used cooking oil. They operated across multiple states, used warehouse storage, and moved the oil with commercial tanker trucks. They were going strong for 5 whole years, and if they were working every day, they netted around $2,000 per night. In total, almost 10,000 pounds of used cooking oil was stolen. And it wasn't really that difficult. Compare that to other crimes and you can kind of see why these organized groups got involved. Allegedly, these guys also decided to use some of the profits they made to run a nightclub in North Carolina. I think there's room for an oil joke here. I just can't find it.
And like everybody know, ain't no party like it did.
Anyways, restaurant owners and biodiesel companies across the country have gotten pretty blindsided by this new form of theft. A UCO collection company, Buffalo Biodiesel, has had drivers state that they often show up to restaurants and all the cooking oil is already gone. In fact, that cost them a cool $10 million in 2022, and one could guess even more in the following years. Now more than ever, restaurant owners are becoming aware of how valuable this seemingly stinky garbage really is. Lockable containers with reinforced lids have become standard in the industry. Some restaurants have even taken it a step above that to ensure that the night thieves don't come. A good measure that these restaurants have taken is installing more security cameras in the back. That paired with some motion sensing lights and some of the cooler tech like oil level sensors are probably enough to keep the more novice criminals away, which is a good portion of them.
It's working.
However, these two issues aren't even a problem for restaurants in bigger cities like New York, who don't have the option to store their grease outside anyway because of space limitations. For them, simply locking it in the basement and being aware that some poser might show up at their doorstep trying to ask for it is generally enough to keep it safe.
I'm getting really sick of you!
Believe it or not, people actually do get pretty long prison sentences for this crime. Because of the rise in cases involving millions of dollars being stolen, like the one I mentioned earlier, federal prosecutors aren't treating these cases lightly. The U.S. Attorney's Office knows about liquid gold and prosecutes against the theft of it accordingly. Larger operations face charges for interstate conspiracy, wire fraud, and commodity theft. The sentences can reach anywhere from 15 to 25 years in prison. In the 2019 case in North Carolina, each of the 21 people indicted were facing 25 years in prison and a $500,000 fine. State laws have been updated in the past 2 decades to classify large-scale grease theft as felony commodity crime, but the fundamental issue still remains. As long as used cooking oil maintains its value as a renewable fuel source, it will attract thieves. The industry loses an estimated $40 to $75 million annually to theft. What's remarkable is that this waste product that most people don't even talk about has created this billion-dollar industry and criminal ecosystem along with it. Those metal containers behind the restaurant contain something so valuable that criminals are willing to risk very long prison sentences. And it smells like a fart.
Keep the grill going non-stop to crank out as much grease as possible.